Number 1. I'm no storyteller, so I want to apologise for that. This happened between late 2009 and early 2010. I live in a really small town in the suburbs of a big city in the Midwest. I remember first hearing about it in school. I was 13 and in 7th grade at the time. This took place in reading class. We had a pretty cool teacher, so we messed around and talked all the time. The talk at my school was about these door-to-door magazine salesmen. Apparently, they would come to your house and ask if you wanted to purchase a magazine subscription, and got aggressive if you denied. This girl in my class was telling us that one guy selling magazines came to her house and her mum let him in. He was telling her mum how beautiful she was and kept complimenting her. At one point, he smelled her hair and asked,
"What shampoo do you use?"
To which she replied with, "I don't know, the one my husband buys?" And the guy was taken aback that she was married and made some excuse to quickly leave. They also visited 2 other kids in the class, but their stories are pretty uneventful. At this point, they hadn't visited my house. That happened a few weeks later. I was sitting on the couch watching TV while my mum and stepdad were in the basement playing darts or something. It was around 2 p.m. and I heard a knock on the door. I opened the door and it was a skinny white guy, early 20s, about 5'7". He had a Monster Energy wallet in his hand. He said to me in a southern accent,
"Yo, yo, yo, is your dad around?"
I told him to wait 1 second and left the door slightly open. We have a glass door after the main door, and as I was walking down, I heard my dogs growling at him, which was weird because they rarely ever do that unless they're really angry. I told my mum and stepdad that there was some random guy we've never met, and they immediately got red flags due to him asking,
"Is your dad here?"
instead of,
"Are your parents here?"
So my stepdad went up and talked to him for about 2 minutes. He came back and started having a go at me for leaving the door slightly open. The guy asked him if he wanted to buy a magazine subscription, to which of course he denied, and asked him,
"Where are the young people at?"
To which my stepdad replied, "Oh, we're all old around here," to ward him off because he had a really bad feeling about him. Okay, so fast forward 2 months. My stepdad asked if I remembered the situation from a couple months ago and showed me the paper. It turned out the magazine salesmen were a group of scam artists from Missouri that were targeting small towns in different states. There were about 4 of them, and they would individually go door to door and steal people's money with fake magazine subscriptions. One of them got arrested for sexually assaulting a woman in the next town over, in her own house. That's how their cover was blown. Luckily, the mugshot wasn't of the same guy that came to my house. But it makes me think, what could have happened to that other girl's mum if she wasn't in the room with her, or if my mum was home alone and answered the door? I'm glad those sickos were caught in time before they could do more harm. So, creepy door-to-door magazine salesman, let's not meet. Number 2. It was a beautiful day out, so I decided to clean the house. I was pretty much done with the cleaning and the last thing I had to do was move some tools and such to my shed in my carport in the front of my home. I had just finished and was sweeping the area by my front door. I looked up and saw this man walking on the road in front of my carport. As soon as he got to my driveway, he stopped, turned, and stared at me. Stone still, just staring at me for a good minute or so. I don't get feelings from encounters with people. You're either nice or you're not. I just got such a sense of unease from him. Like he was a murderer. Just evil. He was older, probably late 50s to 60s. Full grey head and beard. He stared at me long enough to get a really good look at him. I have 2 pugs. They love people. Anyone they meet, they're like, pet me. They came out of the house and went down to the street. The guy stopped staring at me and was trying to call them over to him. Nope. They saw him and ran right back into the house. Luckily for me, I had an axe just inside my door, within arm's reach. I grabbed it and put it on the ground in front of me, basically daring him to try something. He then decided he would continue on his way, watching me the entire time until I left his vision of sight. Let's just say, sleep did not come easy for a while. Thankfully, I moved a couple months later. Still, to this day, a couple of years later, I still get chills thinking about that guy. Number 3. When my daughter was a baby, not quite a year old, I decided to take her to a local park in my town. I had fond memories of my own mother taking me to this park when I was a kid, and I was excited to take mine there on a nice summer morning. It was later in the morning on a Sunday. The park was pretty empty, in spite of the nice weather, because everyone was in church, except us heathens. The park in the middle of town, and my memories of it as a child, made me think it was a safe place. Despite the park's wooded areas and close proximity to a major interstate. I am a pretty reserved person usually, so I was kind of glad that the park wasn't crowded yet. I put my daughter in a baby swing and started pushing the swing. Off of one of the many walking trails that wind through the park, in and out of the surrounding wooded area, this scraggly looking dude, in his late 20s or early 30s, came strolling towards us. He had a normal appearance, seemed sober, and I didn't give him a second thought, until he came up to the swing set and just stood nearby. He didn't have a kid or pet with him. He was just randomly standing a few feet away from us, looking creepy as hell. He said hello, and I acknowledged his greeting with a slight nod. He told me that I had a pretty baby, and I said thank you. He was inching a little closer towards us, and my instinct was to put myself between him and the swing. By this time, my heart was beating out of my chest, and I was wondering what I should do, if I could kill a man with my bare hands. I decided it was time to get out of there. I stopped the swing and took my daughter out of it. As I started to carry her away from the scary guy, he stepped just a little closer and asked me,
Do you think she would let me hold her?
This man had a strange look on his face that I couldn't read. But I didn't need to do that to know that something was super wrong. I stood up, as tall as my 5'4" frame would allow. I looked him dead in the eyes and said I wouldn't let him hold her and to go somewhere else before I called the police. I held eye contact long enough for him to get nervous, which felt like forever, but was probably a few seconds, and he backed down. It was like when two cats fight and the tougher cat stares the weaker one down until it gives him up. I was legitimately worried that I might snap and attack him. Don't mess with a helicopter, mum. By this time, other families and people had begun to show up at the park, so I was feeling braver and braver. Deciding it was time to go home, we headed for the car. In hindsight, I probably should have reported him to the police or something. But how can you report something because it felt weird? It was just the way his body language felt intrusive and creepy. The weird question and the intense and yet slightly off look in his eyes. That was almost 8 years ago, and I have never forgotten it. The man slithered back off to whatever rock he crawled out from. I hope he stayed there. Hello everyone, SinisterShaf here. I hope you enjoyed this short collection of stories. I would like to say a big thank you to the authors of these stories for giving me permission to narrate them. If you liked the video, then please like and subscribe. Also, make sure to comment down below. I do try to reply to all of your comments. And, as always, stay sinister.